What up, zeros and ones? This is Mike Bust from Arcadiance, and in this video I'm going to be doing a demonstration on the purpose and function of elemental shots in Monster Hunter Tri. For this run, I'm going to be using a character that is in single player still, going through the motions in single player. It's my character Derailer, and Derailer has just opened up all of the double monster quests. So I'm going to be using a burnt offering as a benchmark to show how elemental shots work. To be clear, elemental shots is in terms of damage output, which is damage that comes out of your bowgun. There's basically two classes of elemental shots. There's dragon shots and there's everything else. The reason why I say that is that flaming shots, freeze shots, water shots, and thunder shots all load damage that is specific to your bowgun's raw potential, whereas dragon shots do set damage. Now, the set damage that comes out of dragon shots, and I'm going to talk about dragon shots first because here I am an Uragaan using them, but the set damage that comes out of dragon shots is, in terms of just pure damage output, is very similar to the kind of damage output that you might see on other elemental shots if you had a bowgun that had a status screen attack of about 700, which is very, very high. And this is to say that dragon shots do a lot of damage, but it's set damage, so it's a whole lot in single player. It still ends up being a lot in high rank, and there are even better ways to pull your dragon shot damage in high rank up than there are with elemental shots, since there's less degradation in damage when rapid firing dragon shots. So all of that is to say that dragon shots do tremendous amount of damage, and it's basically relatively endgame advanced. And when I say advanced, I mean like adrenaline plus 2 kind of damage levels with endgame pieces of equipment. This is all very interesting in the function of dragon shots because they give them to you in single player and they allow you to use them. Here I am hunting an Uragaan, and an Uragaan is in one of the later classes of monsters in Monster Hunter Tri. But nevertheless, I'm basically able to get him down to capture readiness around 5 minutes into the quest. And that's a bit of a difficult task for a number of the Blade Master classes, if not all of them, honestly. And it's even a difficult task for taking different sorts of strategies with bowgunning ammo types. Because of the particular function of dragon shots, and the particular damage inputs on Uragaan, specifically his ability to take large amounts of dragon damage on his head and his stomach, allows these dragon shots to do excessive amounts of damage. I'm just going to say that it's excessive, and I don't mean to be pejorative when I say excessive. I just mean that it's a lot of damage when you compare it to other things that would potentially be available to you in single player or otherwise. And this is all really interesting in the discussion of elemental shots because, as I pointed out at the beginning, dragon shots work really differently than other elemental shots do, especially in terms of what you can expect out of their performance per monster and per technique. They have to be aimed quite a bit, for one thing. They kind of work like a cross, in my mind, they work like a cross between a pierce shot and an exhaust shot. And I say like a pierce shot because they deliver sequential hits which are really close together and are reminiscent of like really short range pierce gunning. But they're like an exhaust shot in that even though they're progressing forward as they connect their hits, they're also kind of curving downwards. I mean, they have this bit, a little bit of like a lilting motion as they go down. So that affects a lot of how they're used. They have to be fairly particularly aimed, and it's not even so much that they have to be particularly aimed the way that like normal shots have to be aimed, where like you're just hitting that one damage zone. I mean, they kind of have a little bit of a time lapse as they deliver damage. So dragon shots, very high damage, allowed to be used in single player and maintain high damage principles throughout the game. So here I am capturing the Uragaan, and I'm right about 8 minutes in. Basically, an Eruptor threw me off from one of my trank shots, and I wasn't able to tranquilize him and capture him right away. So it took a few extra minutes, and he was kind of uncooperative, as you saw there. So, getting into the other elemental shots. The other elemental shots deal damage based on your bowgun raw attack. The other elemental shots are flaming, freeze, water, and thunder. So as just a little sidebar, it's interesting to me that it's thunder damage and not lightning damage, because it's obviously looks like, lightning damage. Maybe too much Final Fantasy in that. Maybe that's why they do that. Who knows? In any case, the other 4 elemental shots. Flaming shots are unique in that they deal damage similar to how normal shots deal damage, which is to say that they hit a particular hit zone, they deal all their damage there, and they deal 45% of your bowgun's raw attack directly to that hit zone. And so in that sense, they're snipeable the way that normal 2-shots or direct damage shots are. Slicing shots are also kind of direct damage. And, they're snipeable. You can directly aim them at specific zones and acquire specific things. With the other elemental shots, freeze, water, and thunder. Or lightning, if you will. In any case, with the other elemental shots, they kind of work like pure shots in that they hit a specific zone and then they travel through it. And this is a really significant aspect to how they work. They deal 15% of raw damage per hit, so their damage output is really similar to flaming shots. I mean, it's 1 hit of 45 with flaming shots, 3 hits of 15 with the other 3. It's essentially the same thing as far as damage output, but because the other elemental shots are working kind of like pure shots and they're traveling through, they're going to be more influenced by the hit zones of the monster. Now, there's something really interesting about how elemental shots work in general. It's my belief. Let me take it back a step. All of the elemental hit zones on monsters generally top off around 30 to maybe 35%, and they usually bottom out. Sometimes they bottom out around 5%, but generally, actually, they bottom out around 10 to 15, and you get a lot of 20% shots in the middle. When you look at shot damage in comparison, a lot of shot damage will go as high as 60 to 90% and as low as 10 to 20 in a lot of cases. And because of that, there's less disparity in the damage inputs for the monster, such that you don't have to aim elemental shots as much as you do pure shots. You do still have to aim them, and there are damage zones where you don't want to hit, and so you do want to avoid those as well. But it's not as pressure sensitive as pure shots. Also dissimilar to pure shots rather, is that pure shots load far more of their damage from the range, and they actually have a range variable in which they can deal more or less damage. But elemental shots are not as range dependent. So as such, you've got more generalized hit zones to hit. You're not as range dependent, so you're not as stressed out as far as how you're actually operating as a player. And so because of that, they have a more generalized damage pattern. Now, please don't mistake me to be saying that they're of poor usage or you shouldn't use them, because actually they're great. And I think that the reason that they're great, this is my idea on it, is that the general philosophy is that when you're playing in group play, if you're playing on a team with a number of other weapon classes, and there's general disparity between what other people are bringing. You've got a hammer user that's going for the head primarily. You've got a lancer that might be going for claw breaks, depending on the monster. A switch axer that might want to cut tails or just hit them all over the place. Who knows? If you're using elemental shots of the nature of water, freeze, and thunder, since they have this effect of hitting multiple hit zones and dealing more generalized damage, you're essentially assisting the party as a whole a little better than you might be doing with shot damage, in which case, with shot damage, you'll be trying to deal more direct damage and deal your damage in a more meaningful way to very specific hit zones. Now, if you're working together with other hunters to also hit the same hit zones they're hitting, then shot damage, of course, would have a greater advantage in pulling things like flinches or breaks at those specific zones. But if you're working in a real team play kind of situation, you can really see where elemental shots hold their own and really come ahead of other shots in that since they're doing more generalized damage, things like flinches or breaks will come more easily to a team that is working well together. Also of interest, there's a number of places in the game where a monster will not take as much cutting, impact, or shot damage on a specific location as they will elemental damage. Things like Uragon's chin, Barroth's head, Agnaktor when they're armored. And because of that aspect of doing more generalized damage actually kind of turns out to being an advanced damage on those zones, since they're harder to do damage with the other shot classes. Okay, so full disclosure time. We're going to talk just for a minute about a burnt offering. The first time I came in to do this quest, I came in with Royal Launcher Frame, Royal Launcher Barrel, and the Needler Stock. And I came in with only Dragon Shots and Water Shots. And also Pain Shots and Trank Shots. And what I found happened is that I wasn't able to get Uragon down to capture readiness with just the Dragon Shots, and so I had to use a few Water Shots to get him down to perfect capture readiness. When I came up on Agnaktor, I not only went through all my Water Shots and all of my Combines, but I also went through the 20 Water Shots they give you in the box, and I still couldn't get Agnaktor down to capture readiness. So I switched up my design. I went with the Poison Stinger frame, which has a higher raw than the Royal Launcher, and as you can see here, I brought Cluster Shots as a secondary shot. And I built in a secondary shot for both monsters. I brought Poison for Uragon, so I could bring his health down enough to make the Dragon Shots meaningful to use alone. And I brought in the Cluster Shots to help with Agnaktor once I ran out of Water Shots. And I find that I think this is part of the general philosophy behind elemental shots in general. This might just be anecdotal, and I don't want to spread misinformation, certainly. But I think this is kind of part of how elemental shots work, is that you're intended to bring secondary shots. And this is not only evident in the amount of damage they do, but also the amount of combines that are available to you. You usually have a combine center of 10 to 30 shots for each of the elementals. With Dragon, it's just 10, and you only have 20 for your pouch. So they're intentionally giving you less combinables and bringing your damage down to a more generalized effect. And because of this, I think that you will essentially be required to bring other kinds of secondary shots. This is my general philosophy on the matter. Please don't take it as set in stone fact, but this is a general view and a demonstration of how I see elemental shots working in Monster Hunter Tri. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Michael Bust of Arcadience saying, peace out, Planet Monster Hunter.